Governments in Europe are relaxing some of the restriction measures to allow people to meet up. Up to 3 households will be able to meet inside in England for 5 days over the holiday. In France, the national nighttime curfew will be lifted on Christmas Eve and on New Year's Eve. And in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel has said their lockdown light will continue until at least the 20th of December. David Nabarro is the World Health Organization's special envoy for COVID-19, and his key advice for people planning on spending Christmas with elderly relatives is to keep socially distancing at all times and, if possible, wear masks around people you don't live with.
We all want to be able to get together over Christmas. It's not been the most wonderful year, 2020, for many of us, and so none of us want to curtail it, but we're asking people to be careful. You see, this virus, unfortunately, doesn't celebrate the end of the year like we do. And so we've got to remember that it just has one purpose in life, which is to move from person to person and cause trouble. And that means we must continue to try to keep the physical distance that matters so much. And we must wear face masks at all times, especially when indoors, if we're not with people that we know really well. And if we really want to be super careful, we wear the masks all the time. Really good hand hygiene, and also a lot of attention to looking after those who are most vulnerable. I think if we do all that, we can get through Christmas without endangering ourselves or others and without prompting a big spike in cases early next year.
Are people really going to be sat on the sofa on Christmas Day with their families with a face mask on? Can you really see people complying with that advice?
Well, obviously, when you're with people who you know have been protecting, then of course you don't need to wear a face mask. You're forming what we call a bubble. But when we're with people who really you don't know what they've been up to, and that may include family members, I think being super careful and being ready to wear masks until you're absolutely certain that they have been being careful, I think that's a good idea. I do think that people have to take this really seriously. We've seen how when people moved around in the summer and then in the autumn months in September, particularly with going back to university, cases really shot up afterwards. And it's the only way we can stop this virus spreading is through maintaining distance and wearing masks, as well as practicing hygiene.
In England, they're allowing 3 families to get together for Christmas over 5 days, and that's led to some fairly uncomfortable conversations that families are having to have about who to invite where. Can I ask you what your plans are for Christmas? What sort of measures are you taking?
Well, it's nice of you to ask. I've got some grandchildren in the UK, and I really badly want to go and see them and to see their parents, my children, and especially because one of them, a little babe called Otto, has only recently been born, and I haven't seen him yet, and that's several months. So I was hoping to get back to the UK, but I think it's going to be difficult. And I think there's the additional challenge all the time is that I have to get back here to work, and you never know when there's suddenly going to be the imposition of restrictions. So I'm not sure, but I kind of suspect I'll be staying at home and continuing in the sort of semi-confinement state I'm in. An additional thing, Rosie, is that I'm 71 and I have to be really careful. All the evidence suggests that most of the transmission of this virus that is occurring is happening in people's domestic spaces. And so that's why I think all of us have to be careful about what we do in our households at Christmas, however much we want to hug each other.
What advice would you give to someone then who really wants to see their grandparents over Christmas and is planning on inviting them round?
Well, please try your best to keep the physical distance rule in place, especially if you can't be absolutely sure that you're free of the virus. Remember that there's some people who are getting this virus who don't have symptoms. And so that means that what really matters is what have you been doing in your life in the 2 weeks before you see your grandparents or other elderly relatives. If you can't be 100% sure, please maintain the physical distancing and masking rule. It's not just for you, it's for them. And the last thing you want is for some accident to happen and you pass the virus on to them unknowingly, and then something terrible happens to them. And it's been known. I know people who've been in that situation.